High-speed rail service for long-distance trips on the mainland is resumed today. Price for COVID jabs will be decided by private health service providers. Donald Trump will go to court next week. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The Hong Kong section of the high-speed rail link resumed long-haul service today after a 3-year hiatus. The MTR says around 30,000 passengers are expected to depart from the station today. Tickets for Beijing-Xi and Fuzhou have been sold out. Veronica Lin reports.
After more than 3 years of pandemic-enforced suspension, West Kowloon is once again connected to far-off destinations on the mainland. The station was packed with crowds this morning. This traveler, who hasn't been back to the mainland in over 3 years, says she's excited about the quarantine-free travel arrangement.
Actually, I'm going to spend a week to visit my parents. It's been like 4 years since I saw them. We still needed to do quarantine at the time. It was July or August 2020. So I remember that I stayed 14 days in the hotel to finish the quarantine.
The high-speed rail link has been gradually resuming services since mid-January this year, as tourists began to return to Hong Kong. The MTR says around 20,000 passengers pass through the station every day. From now on, interprovincial trains are resuming, with direct access to 66 stations as well as 164 trains per day. Some travelers believe the high-speed rail is the most convenient way to travel to the mainland.
Much more convenient. It just takes 15 minutes from here to Shenzhen, and then from Shenzhen I can take a taxi to the airport.
My understanding, and it's a clear understanding, it is the best way to travel across China. It's quick, it's clean, safe.
Meanwhile, at the Beijing-Xi railway station, the first train to West Kowloon departed at 10:11 a.m. via Shijiazhuang, Wuhan, Guangzhou South, and more. The ride is 8 hours 35 minutes, 25 minutes faster than before the pandemic. The train is expected to arrive by 6:30 p.m. All 1,200 tickets were sold out. The first long-haul train to arrive in West Kowloon was from Chongqing-Xi at around 4 p.m. Trains from Hunan and Guangxi arrived shortly after. Also, a train that departed from Tianjin-Xi at 11:05 a.m. is expected to arrive in West Kowloon at 9:44 p.m. As West Kowloon Station further resumes its services, passengers can now travel to and from the mainland via the high-speed rail for long-haul trips. Veronica Lin, TVB News.
Besides traveling by high-speed rail, many residents cross the mainland border via other channels to visit family and pay respects to their ancestors today. At the Shenzhen Bay border, many crossed the border this morning. After arriving at the border, travelers can head directly to the checkpoint. There's also been visitors coming to Hong Kong via the Shenzhen Bay immigration control point. They said it took around 20 minutes to cross the border. The Immigration Department believes there will be a combined 9 million people crossing the borders in both directions over the tomb sweeping and Easter holidays. The Lo Wu checkpoint is expected to be the busiest, with up to 220,000 travelers passing through a day. Starting April 20th, residents will have to pay for a fourth COVID jab unless they belong to the priority groups. Authorities say the private market will decide how much the cost of the vaccine will be.
As the COVID epidemic continues to subside, the Health Bureau announced that adults who are not within priority groups do not really need the fourth COVID shot. Meanwhile, people aged 50 or above, those with weak immunity and chronic illnesses, pregnant women and healthcare workers are classified as priority groups. They can receive an additional booster shot for free within this year, with a dosing interval of at least 6 months after the last dose or COVID-19 infection. In that case, when's the best time for them to get vaccinated? Government advisor Professor Ivan Hung said the risk of reinfection is low for those who have been infected, as the mixed immunity barrier is high. He said those who have recovered from COVID can take the booster in the second half of the year. For those who have not been infected and have received 3 or 4 shots, Hung said they can consider getting a booster now if it's been at least 6 months since their last dose. Meanwhile, those who do not belong to priority groups can continue getting their first 3 doses for free. But starting April 20th, they will have to pay for a booster. Hung believes people in low-risk groups who think they are exposed to high risks of infection will pay for a booster. Still, will all such vaccine shots be charged the same? Health Secretary Lo Chung-Mao said today those who do not belong to the high-risk groups can look for a private medical center or clinic voluntarily. Lo said the clinics will determine the price of each vaccine dose.
Secretary for Justice Paul Lam said the government will not impose a so-called blanket ban on overseas lawyers to represent national cases in Hong Kong. He added the arrangement to have the chief executive vet and give permission to an overseas lawyer to come to Hong Kong is about good use of judicial resources.
What we intend to do is to introduce a mechanism for the purpose of safeguarding national security. But even then, we do not intend to impose a complete ban. We introduce a system under which the circumstances of each case will be assessed individually. So there is still a real chance for overseas lawyer to come to Hong Kong, even if to allow him to come to Hong Kong to appear in that particular case may involve national security. So our system, even under our amendment, is very, very liberal.
The government has slammed the U.S.'s 2023 Hong Kong Policy Act report for its twisted remarks and smears over the city's rule of law and human rights issues. The annual report noted the SAR government continues to arrest and charge those who criticize the Hong Kong and Chinese governments. It added defendants involved in national security cases are being detained for a long time and that overseas lawyers need to get permission from the chief executive to represent national security law cases. The SAR government disapproved the critical remarks and urged the U.S. to stop interfering in Hong Kong and China affairs. The Commissioner's Office of China's Foreign Ministry in Hong Kong also slammed the report's ill intent to smear the successful implementation of one country, two systems. Overseas, former U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to appear in a New York courtroom next week. It will not only mark the first time a former president has faced criminal charges, it also comes as a reckoning for a man long nicknamed Teflon Don, who has managed to evade serious legal jeopardy despite 40 years of legal scrutiny. Tracy Furness reports.
An early frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination, Donald Trump is expected to turn himself in on Tuesday when he will be formally arrested and arraigned. And like any other person facing trial, he will be booked, fingerprinted and photographed before he enters a plea. He faces charges including at least one felony offense related to hush money paid to women during his 2016 presidential campaign. This indictment pierces the cloak of invincibility that seems to follow Trump through his decades in business and politics as he faced allegations of fraud, collusion and sexual misconduct. He was also the first president to be impeached twice. But Trump's supporters still see this as a political move.
I think it's all political scheme. I think it's a ploy to try to not get him to run for presidency again.
I think that there will be allegations outside of court that the prosecutors have misused their discretion and have filed this case for political reasons. There already have been lots of allegations of that kind. Despite all the noise, there's no evidence suggesting that this is a political prosecution.
Security was tight outside the office of Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg on Friday after an indictment was issued against former President Donald Trump. A New York judge in a document unsealed on Friday authorized Bragg to make the charges public. Trump plans to fly to New York on Monday from his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida and spend the night at Trump Tower before appearing in court early on Tuesday, according to sources. Trump plans to return to Florida afterwards. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is in the running to be the new head of NATO, a British newspaper reported Friday. A number of NATO member states suggested von der Leyen would take over the alliance this October, the report said. But there are reports that the UK is likely to object to her appointment due to issues related to her previous role as Germany's defense minister. NATO's current Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, is expected to end his term as planned in October. Welcome back to TVB News. Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi has arrived in Beijing for a two-day visit, according to media reports. On the eve of Hayashi's arrival, the defense departments of China and Japan launched a direct military hotline to maintain communication over maritime and air issues. Both countries reached the consensus to set this channel back in 2007 to facilitate regional peace and stability. But the plan was put on hold because of the COVID pandemic and Diaoyu Islands dispute. Hayashi said he is set to meet Foreign Minister Qin Gang to discuss a range of issues, including the detention of a Japanese employee of Astellas Pharma and the release of water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Moscow was widely criticized as the United Nations Security Council debated Russia's decision to deploy tactical nuclear weapons in neighboring Belarus. Still, Moscow is continuing with the plan against what they call provocation from the West. David Garrett reports.
Meeting of the Security Council is called to order.
The risk of a nuclear weapon being used is currently higher than at any time since the depth of the Cold War.
A stark warning. The UN Security Council met at the request of the United States and Albania to discuss Russia's announcement to deploy tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus.
Russia's suggestion that this intended deployment is somehow justified because of the use of armor-piercing ammunition is ludicrous.
China's representative Geng Shuang called for the abolition of the nuclear sharing arrangement. We advocate that all nuclear-armed states should refrain from deploying outside their borders, he said. Russia was asked to state its case.
Valentin
Ryabkov again stated Russia thinks it must deploy tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus to ensure security. He said the measures announced by President Putin, which have so frightened the Zelensky regime and its Western sponsors, or did you seriously expect that we would not properly respond to your aggressive actions? In Belarus, President Alexander Lukashenko, in a TV national address, said he does not fear the possibility of fresh Western sanctions. Minsk was prepared to defend its sovereignty through any means, he said. And in more military maneuvers, US forces are conducting air assault training with Romania at an airbase in Constanta on the shores of the Black Sea. American troops arrived there in June to bolster NATO forces, reassure allies and deter what the US calls further Russian aggression. In Ukraine, President Vladimir Zelensky met with the leaders of Croatia, Slovakia, Slovenia and Moldova to mark the one-year liberation of Bucha after a brutal Russian occupation that lasted a month in 2022. The fact that Russia is going to place nuclear weapons in Belarus indicates a failed meeting with China, Zelensky said. Firstly, Russia needs to demonstrate a self-sufficiency, which Putin has lost. Secondly, the Russian president needs to display certain political steps or victories, but on the battlefield he is failing, Zelensky concluded. And in Bucha, they marked Friday's anniversary. Residents gathered for a candlelit vigil to honour the memory of those killed. They were placed to form the shape of Ukraine. David Garrett, TVB News.
Chinese authorities are set to conduct a cybersecurity review of products sold by US memory chipmaker Micron Technology. According to the Cyberspace Administration of China, the review is aimed at protecting the security of the supply chain for critical information infrastructure and safeguard national security. The move comes after the U.S. imposed a series of export controls on chip-making technology to China. Washington fears such technology could be used to produce chips for applications such as artificial intelligence, which could then be employed by China's military. Washington has also blacklisted China's largest chip firms, including Micron's competitor Yangtze Memory Technologies. Former chairman of the Kuomintang Party, Ma Ying-jeou, continued his mainland tour by visiting Hunan province on Friday to pay respects to his ancestors. It is the first time the island's former leader has set foot in his family's hometown. Jackie Lin with more.
Former Taiwan leader Ma Ying-jeou arrived in Hunan province on Friday to continue his 12-day tour on the mainland. At the age of 73, Ma paid tribute to his grandfather for the first time at the ancestral tomb in his family's hometown, Shantan County. Addressing his late grandfather in local Hunan dialect, Ma said he had upheld the family teaching of reading well and doing good deeds during his 8-year tenure as Taiwan leader. Overwhelmed with emotion at times, Ma said he had actively promoted cross-strait peace and development to achieve the most peaceful and prosperous times between Beijing and Taipei over the past 70 years. After the ceremony, Ma took photos with his 4 sisters in front of the ancestral tomb. While villagers said they were eager to catch a glimpse of Ma, with many milling around Ma's ancestral site, security was high and officers kept villagers away from Ma's group. As some locals greeted Ma chanting, "Welcome home," Ma replied, "Shantan boy is back" in local dialect. During his stay in Hunan, Ma visited his father's alma mater. He also offered bouquets in the capacity of the former chairman of the Kuomintang Party at Nanyue Martyrs Memorial Hall for KMT soldiers who died during the War of Resistance against Japan. After his Hunan visit, he will continue his tour in Chongqing and Shanghai. Ma arrived in Shanghai on Monday to start his mainland tour in a private capacity. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Locally, today marks the 20th anniversary of superstar singer and actor Leslie Cheung's death.
It's the first time I've been here, so I feel still Hong Kong people still have love for Leslie Cheung, so I still feel happy.
It was adorned the area outside the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in Central. Numerous fans queued up on Icehouse Street to pay tribute to Cheung. Some brought roses that spelled out his name, Leslie. Others made red and white paper cranes. Meanwhile, long queues also formed outside the Hong Kong Heritage Museum, where the Miss You Much Leslie exhibition runs until October the 9th. And that's the news. Thanks for watching.